Shabbat Shalom. Tisha B'Av, the fast day that commemorates the destruction of both of the ancient holy temples, is the darkest day of the Jewish year. It comes this year at a particularly fraught moment for the Jewish people. The only surviving remnant of the Holy Temple, the Western Wall, has become a bone of contention between different religious movements, world Jewry, and the Israeli government. At such moments, it's tempting to appeal to the idea of Jewish unity. This has particular power on Tisha B'Av, a day connected to the sin of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. The tradition connecting the destruction of the temple with sinat chinam dates all the way back to the Babylonian Talmud. The Talmud relates the tragic story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. There once was a man who had a friend, Kamsa, and an enemy, Bar Kamsa. Planning a large banquet, he gave his servant a list of all the people he wanted to invite, including his good friend, Kamsa. However, the servant mistakenly delivered the invitation to Bar Kamsa instead. When the host of the banquet saw that Bar Kamsa had arrived, he was furious. In the presence of all the other guests, he yelled, "What are you doing here? Get out." Bar Kamsa replied, "I now realize you didn't mean to invite me, but since I'm already here, please don't embarrass me by throwing me out. Let me stay, and I'll pay for anything I eat." But the host refused, and again insisted that he leave immediately. Bar Kamsa then said, "Please, if you let me stay, I'll pay for half the banquet." But the host continued to demand that he leave his house. Bar Kamsa pleaded one more time, "Please, if you let me stay, I'll pay for the entire banquet." The host refused again, and this time he threw him out bodily onto the street. Bar Kamsa could not forgive this treatment. All the great rabbis were present, and not one of them objected to the way I was treated. So I can only assume that they supported it. Now I shall have my vengeance. Bar Kamsa then traveled to Rome, met with the emperor, and told him that the Jews had rebelled against him. The emperor asked, "How do I know you're telling me the truth?" Bar Kamsa replied, "Send them an animal to be sacrificed in their temple in honor of the government. We'll see whether or not they sacrifice it." The emperor agreed and sent him off with a perfect 3-year-old calf. But on the journey back to Jerusalem, Bar Kamsa made a small cut on the calf's upper lip, thus rendering the animal unfit. So when Bar Kamsa brought the animal to the temple, the Kohanim noticed the blemish and would not accept the calf. When word got back to the emperor, he was furious. This is how the war between the Jews and the Romans began, ultimately leading to the destruction of the Holy Temple and our 19th century exile from Jerusalem. The lesson taught by this story seems clear enough. Contemporary Jews refer to it again and again in their sermons, school lessons, and summer camp activities. However, a deeper dive into this passage suggests that the lesson of Tisha B'Av isn't so much about harmonizing intercommunal strife. It's actually about the danger of failing to stand up for moral values, even at the cost of intercommunal strife. The rabbis in attendance certainly could have stood up for Bar Kamsa. Also, the Talmud recounts the reaction of the rabbis to Bar Kamsa's plan, and I quote, "The rabbis thought to kill Bar Kamsa so that he wouldn't go and speak to the Romans. However, the rabbis never went through with it." And the Talmud isn't shy about assigning blame for the destruction. It happens because of the unwillingness or inability of the rabbis to challenge the actions of their fellow Jews. The Babylonian Talmud was written down some 5 centuries after the events described in this story. But the outlines of the rabbinic account agree with the version of events related by Josephus, the Jewish historian present outside the walls of the city on that fateful 9th day of Av. Despite his recruitment by the Romans, Josephus is the most reliable witness to the siege of Jerusalem. The heroes in Josephus' story are the leaders who take a stand against those whom Josephus calls the Zealots. One of the turning points in Josephus' account is the speech of the high priest Ananus, who denounces the Zealots. "O bitter tyranny that we're under, but why do I complain of the tyrants? Was it not you, the people of Jerusalem, and your sufferance of the Zealots that nourished them?" The actions of the Zealots, their monopoly of the sacred spaces, their pillaging of houses, their wanton destruction of property, all these have a distinctly modern ring to them, as does the language Josephus uses to describe the two parties. The Zealots, he says, are tyrants, and what's at stake is nothing less than the political liberty of the Jewish people. Even more alarming is the verdict Josephus delivers twice. It was the defeat of Ananus and his party that doomed the city. In the opinion of Josephus, the victory of zealotry over respect and tyranny over democracy was not inevitable, nor was it the outcome of an excess of ill feeling. It wasn't even due to the outside pressure of the Roman authorities. It was mostly a question of Jewish politics. While Ananus defended democracy, the idea of a government that works in the interest of all, there was some hope. But once the Zealots had prevailed, the destruction of Jerusalem couldn't have been prevented. The lesson of the destruction of the Holy Temple, as evidenced by Josephus and the rabbis, is less about the value of Jewish unity and more about its limitations. Whatever the merits of Jewish unity, it should not come at the expense of addressing the real issues that divide our community. Nor should it be given priority over the security and well-being of the Jewish people. This is the thrust of Josephus and the rabbis' warning, that ceding power to those unconcerned with the consequences of their commitments ends in catastrophe. Of course, unity is inherently valuable. This is particularly true in times of crisis, when Jews across political and religious divides unite against an external threat. But the appeal to unity, when the threat is internal, as was the case with the Zealots, is not only misguided, it's fraught with danger. Moreover, the enforcers of unity ignore the fact of political and religious pluralism within the Jewish community. Jews have always been deeply divided around issues of politics and religion, and not for no reason. Jewish history is the history of competing factions struggling to shape the future of the Jewish people. The appeal to Jewish unity is actually a kind of nostalgic longing for an imagined past of religious and political harmony. But that past never was, and it never will be. So the lesson of Tisha B'Av may not point so much to the value of unity as to its perils. The fast we engage in ought to remind us of what happens when the forces that stand against political freedom and equal respect are appeased rather than defeated. When a superficial unity trumps what's sensible, the consequences can be disastrous, today in our world as much as in ancient times. Shabbat Shalom.